The Riots of 1968, presented by Michelle Cole. The year of 1968. The year of 1968 was a year of worldwide protest, where many people came together to speak up all around the world about civil rights, about human rights, about working conditions, living conditions. Many of these ideas arose from anti Vietnam protests and civil rights movements. Specifically within France, France seemed to be doing very well at the time from a look at the surface. Underneath, there was much injustice and undignified mistreatment going on. Here I have a quote. Sparked variously by calls for civil rights, economic, social, and racial justice, and an end to authoritarianism, colonial exploitation, and the war in Vietnam. This quote is explaining what truly started the riots of 1968 all over the world, not just in France. Here's a little background on France. France during the 1960s was a time of prosperity and peace under the leadership of President Charles de Gaulle. France was rebuilding itself post World War II, and it seemed to be doing very well off. Economically, it seemed to be doing very great. But underneath the surface, there were many issues that were not being talked about enough, and they were not being focused on. Student disconnect, unfair working conditions, and international influence. And this is including the tension and all of the emotions surrounding the Vietnam War. The student movement begins. 1968 was a year surrounded by social change all across the world, as I have said. This was a year where many people began to stand up for what they believe in and stand up for what they believe is right. Many people were beginning to speak up, and to be more specific, students and middle class workers began coming forward in France and expressing their anger. The student revolt began on May 3rd after the suppression of attempted peaceful demonstrations outside of the Sorbonne. This revolt began due to dissatisfaction with an outdated French university system, including restricted rules and ignorance towards the students' voices on their education. Workers began speaking up. So, in the beginning, it started off as a student revolt, which was based on the way students were being treated within the university and also what they were not able to learn or do within these universities. So, alongside of these students, we have a bunch of these workers seeing how powerful the students' protests are going, and they began to jump in. Here's a quote. The events of May were accumulation of years of dissatisfaction towards French society by groups larger than just youth or students. Workers were speaking up about their discontent with the social and political state and order. This includes issues such as economic inequality, authoritarianism, and a separation between the people and the government. The people were not feeling as if the government was listening to them, nor was the government acting as if they were either. So the people began to stand up. The deliverance. The method used by the students and workers to use their voice consisted of riots and strikes, but they also recognized the use of mass communication. During this time, posters and things that would be able to spread very quickly became very popular within these protests in France. Hundreds of posters and arts were designed and printed in France. As we've seen and learned in this class, posters and art is a big form of propaganda. But in this case, this was the biggest way people could use their voice in their opinions. They were able to speak out towards hundreds of people by just one poster. I have another quote. Artists, students, and workers, who for the most part participated in newly established art collectives, created the posters. Many of these posters were created by students and workers themselves who were protesting about the treatment that they were undergoing at this time. Here's an example of a poster during this time. This poster says, I quote, "Be young and shut up." Very nice. A poster like this is signifying the wealthier businessman controlling the younger working generation, the upcoming generation of students, workers, the upcoming next generation. And this picture and poster, this is just symbolizing how controlling the government is trying to be over this youthful generation that is up and coming. Strikes and more aggressive tactics. As the protest continued, more and more people began to get involved, which definitely caused a lot of chaos, a lot of anger, a lot of emotion and tension. As this continued, these individuals began to come up with ideas on how to get their message across stronger, how to get the government to truly listen and to truly hear the people. This was a particularly violent phase where students set up a barricade in the Latin Quarter to protest. This was known as the Night of the Barricades. It was a very aggressive and violent time in this protest. Up until then, this protest had remained seemingly peaceful, but this was definitely a very important night within the year of 1968. The government's response. In the beginning, French police used a very forceful approach by using tear gas or arresting completely innocent people who were just there voicing their opinions and protesting against the matter. Due to these harsh responses from the police, the protesters only amped it up. The protests only continued to increase and escalate, and the emotions were once again rising. This was, again, a particularly violent phase in the protest. This took place on the night of May 10th through the 11th. The students decided to put up barricades in the Latin Quarter to protest the presence of police and the unauthorized violence they were using against the protesters. These protesters were sending out a message that we are going to continue to do this, but we are going to stop you from harming these innocent people. Police appearance and government response only proved to the people that they were against them instead of with them. The way the police reacted to these peaceful protesters truly showed the true colors of how the government felt about these protests and the people's opinions and well-being. The impact and outcome. The outcome of the riots of May 1968 are still ongoing, and we are still witnessing the outcomes today. They did, however, lead to significant social reforms, and these included improvements on wages and working conditions, and they also led to a big focus on university students and the conditions at which they were under. Here I have a quote. But in other ways, nothing would be the same again. May 1968 ushered in both the women's movement and the sexual revolution in France. Workers got higher salaries, better working conditions, and stronger unions in response to their protest demands. The riots of May 1968 were full of change, but not only for the students, but for the workers as well, because as I had mentioned, it started off from the students, but the workers joined, and truly the combination of both parties truly made it such a impactful and remembrance of an experience. The riots caused improved work wages and improved schooling conditions and opportunities in the long run. I would say the riots of 1968 have been proven to be successful. Maybe not as much as we hoped for, but it is still a step in the right direction. And here I have another quote. The consequence of 1968 for the affected group was that it became easier to progress to a further stage of higher education and thus to obtain more years of a higher education than would have otherwise been the case. This just proves without these riots and without the people coming together and protesting about what they believe in, the conditions of the universities and for the workers would still be the same, and there would be no fair treatment among these people, and the social injustice would still be continuing today. So I think these outcomes were very positive. Maybe, as I said, not as much as we'd hope for, but it is a step in the right direction. Thank you for listening. I hope you learned something new. Thank you again. And here is my citations page.